Good morning, everyone. Big crowd. I do want to appreciate all the stowaways from the design track next door. Love that and hope that your legs hold up for our talk. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tarra. I'm a design leader at Atlassian today, and our story is about sprinting in the dark. And this is a nonfiction story. This is something you and I do each and every day. There we go. This is something you and I do each and every day when the destination is really unknown, where we have to lead with conviction with so many unanswered questions. It's about when the conditions are imperfect, the stakes are high, and we really have to make bold bets. And sometimes we have to do that with naysayers nipping at our heels. And we also have to take a lot of people with us because doing something impossible can't be done alone. This is also a story about transformation, where Kristin and I in Atlassian had to rattle loose the status quo and create an ironclad partnership between design and product. And we have some surprising results that we're really excited to talk about. This matters even more than ever because with AI, whether you're thinking it's an inflection point or an existential crisis, it means that we really have to double down on creating products that are differentiated in the market in this sea of sameness. It also means that we have to make big change with success and also just make sure we have job security moving forward. So I'll start our story back in January 2023. I was a design leader at Atlassian for a couple of years, and I'd seen a couple things, really high growth and a culture of autonomy. What that meant is we had a lot of products creating features everywhere. They were popping up in all these different places, and there was wild inconsistency. Also, they weren't very modern or cohesive because people would launch an MVP and then move on to the next shiny thing. You remember at that time as well, there was a big dip in the tech market just after COVID. Remember there was like thousands of people being laid off in the US? Well, here back at home at Atlassian, it was also code red. The entire R&D organization was asked, we need you to focus on initiatives that will improve our revenue. So what that meant for me was, your Tarra, your remit is Jira platform. You're looking after 4 Jira products. And what we want you to do as a design leader is redesign the navigation because we think if people will be able to switch between project types, between the Jiras, we'll get cross-flow. They'll use more of the products and therefore sign up for them and more revenue. Now, as a design leader, if you ask me to redesign something and make it cohesive, I'm super excited. But also on a personal note, I was coming back to work. I was in recovery. I had suffered a stroke. And I wanted to get back to work and do something with impact that was really going to make a difference. So I was like, giddy up, let's do this. So this was a starting point. This is what Jira looked like. We had a scope of the project. We had to redesign the top bar and also this sidebar. And that's where people would find their project work. And when I started to have a look at the different products and see what I was starting with, these were the different Jira starting points as well as settings. Now they had different interactions, different terminology, different styling. They were wildly inconsistent. And users were telling us when there's a similar-ish thing in one product and the other, when I click on it, it does different things depending on which product I'm in. We also had a mountain of feedback from users who said, I can't find my work. And if we're a work management product, that's kind of important. So that was the starting point, but for me personally, it really didn't make sense to just do this for Jira Family. I was like, what about all the other products we have in our suite? Why wouldn't we just start doing the redesign and prepare for scale? Think big. Why can't we just do it everywhere, not just this one pocket of the world? The team thought I was absolutely nuts. They were like, this is what we do, we're in Jira, but they're not the only ones. I started going out to these other products and saying, hey, you all have all of this managed on your local code base. You could have so much consistency and developer efficiency goodness. You could get on design tokens and unlock all of their benefits. It would set you up for scale. And as I was having these discussions, trying to get these people on board with my global domination agenda, a couple of things came back and they said, hey, Tarra, we're actually kind of scarred. About 5 years ago, we did a redesign and it went really pear-shaped. I had one really senior IC who said, I really wouldn't do this if you want to keep your job. I also had people in the business say, hey, we're not set up for this. Our structures and our goals, our incentives are per product, and you're trying to make us work differently and move across. It's just not possible. It's just not how we do things. It's not how we work. But I remembered 2 things. When I joined Atlassian, my very tenured and very calm engineering manager said, Tarra, the most successful people here at Atlassian, they don't stay in their swim lane. I also, from me, have something when someone goes, oh, it can't be done, there's just no way. There's this little part of my brain that's like, oh yeah, watch me do it. So again, I was like, giddy up. So we started with Jira Family. We were having really good success, and I was starting to talk to these other product teams. But eventually I did hit a wall because those prioritization discussions happen when only PMs are in the room. And you can't get a cross-functional team on board unless you have a really strong product leader. And then I met Kristin.
So I joined Tarra about a year later, and I love what she was doing, but I could see very clearly this program needed strong product leadership if it had any chance of success. So I started asking around to my product leaders, hey, have you heard about this global nav thing? And they were like, it's a tax, it's a mandate. It's something we have to do for being part of Atlassian. But I saw an opportunity because in organizations that I'd worked at before, programs like this would actually change the game. So I wanted to model the way of how you can actually apply craft to these types of changes to drive big outcomes. Because I believe great experiences can drive business outcomes. But it wasn't going to be easy because we had 61 different teams. That's 61 different roadmaps, 61 different PMs, 61 different priorities and KRs that we all had to get rowing in the same direction. So I took a very politically unpopular decision and said, I'm going to add more work to my plate willingly. And we went sprinting. So if you remember where Tarra said we started, telling us, why are you doing this, thinking you're crazy? These are the now questions that we get. How did you do this? What did you do differently? And what did you learn? And we're here to share with you the 3 learnings that we had that got us through this. So whenever you do massive change, you need to have belief in yourself, but more importantly, strong belief in what you're actually trying to do. And when you think about that, it lets you understand what you really care about and maybe what you can be flexible on. And for us, what we really cared about was quality. And we define quality as looking at our target customer, the one we wanted to win, looking at their expectations, their current state, and what we wanted them to feel when they saw this new experience. And their current state was kind of shit. It was filled with paper cuts, and it came through in our feedback. 1/3 of all of our negative CSAT feedback was about the navigation. And when you think about how the users actually use our product, they spend 40% of their time trying to find information. This was a compounding retention and adoption risk if we didn't do anything. So we took that on board and said, what does this new navigation need to look like? We need to buck that reputation, and we need to think of something different. And this is where we started to think about first impressions. We wanted to make sure that when that person came back and they saw this new navigation, they were going to be like, oh shit, these people came to play. This is a different Atlassian. This is a cohesive Atlassian. And that quality mindset permeated everything we did. For example, in EAP, in those very early stages, when you're trying to figure out, do I have a good idea? Did I make the right choices? We were explicit about who we let in and how we measured success. And when the business started pushing us to measure everything, because experimentation, we waited until we had a quality experience that we could send out to customers. And when I reflect on what we were actually doing during this stage, it was about teaching the business that intuition is data. It's just not statistically significant yet.
The other really firm belief we had was going together. Now, that's not rocket science, but as I mentioned in context, that was really, really hard to do. And it was absolutely necessary to bring these teams together. And one of the reasons was as well is because the nature of our redesign was taking everyone's work from the top bar and completely moving it to the sidebar. So every day when you go look for something, it was going to be very, very different. And I didn't want this disjointedness to happen. So if we were having Jira Family on board, I wanted to start rallying other products. So an example was I wanted to get Confluence on board because they were the other really massive product. So I went to their leadership team and I took a few things with me. I took data saying, hey, 2 and 3 users are using this product and this product. And if one looks like this and one looks like that, and they're switching between them every day. Look what that looks like. And I showed them and all the execs went, ugh. And that was good. They're going like, yeah, this is what you're going to put in front of customers. This is why it's so incredibly important to do this. But to our learning of, saying we have to go together, but being flexible, they did say, look, we don't think that your current design really quite works for us, that job to be done and our use cases, we're just not quite there yet. We're not ready to sign up. So what we did is we designed a variant for them to say, we understand that you need something a little bit different. The pattern doesn't need to be super strict. Let's make something that works for you. And in that way, they joined the program. The other bit of flexibility we gave is they said, we're not ready to join your EAP. We know everyone else is, but we're just not ready because roadmaps. So we said, look, you can join later as long as you join our GA launch at the same time. And that flexibility got them on board. And then we were able to make sure that 2 and 3 users are seeing a similar experience. Now, that was the hard but better path. It took way more time and coordination and negotiation. There's a better outcome for customers. We also came up with some new ceremonies, but I'll cover those in our next learning, which is when you make that pivot, you got to take people with you. You know, they always say tech is easy and people are hard. Well, we were definitely feeling that. One of the things we had to do was really create those conditions for success. Kristin tells me all the time, Tarra, this project technically should have failed. We had everything working against us to make people go alone and fast and disjointed and looking after their own metrics. So how are we going to flip the script? Well, first we looked at what we just can't control. We can't control those org structures, and that everyone has to look after their own revenue metrics. Meaning a global navigation program, which is metric neutral by design, is probably not at the top of their list. Also, incentives. At the end of the year, the money going in my bank account at Atlassian is based on me meeting those local metrics. And that was just a very real factor in motivating people. So what could we do? We looked at what was in our control. We actually decided to do a lot more effort on visibility and comms. We wanted to make a really big deal to say, look at these people being involved, look at the progress we're having. We shouted from the rooftops what was happening horizontally across the organization. People needed to see it. Next thing was on people. So we handpicked the staff that we had. We had started with a junior team. We needed to up-level their seniority. We also only kept the best performers. And if people got asked to go on another team and they weren't the best performers, we let them go. We also decided to make sure people had a platform mindset and they had to be willing to sprint with us. Otherwise, you just were not right for this project. And lastly, this one was awesome. Connective tissue. There were no moments or ceremonies for teams to come together. There was no moment where Jira needed to talk to Confluence or Trello or Bitbucket or Loom. That connective tissue didn't exist. We had to create it. So our program manager, she created this meeting. It doesn't sound like rocket science. It was called an alignment ritual, 30 minutes. Everyone come together, share your updates. But nobody wanted to come. Another meeting. I don't see the benefit for me. It was like pulling teeth trying to get people to come. We're like, you can make your update asynchronously, but we have to have cross-functional people coming together. Once we started rolling and had momentum, this was the glue. Everyone was like, this is the most important meeting of the whole week. And in our retro, we heard that that was the critical success factor for us working together. But it didn't exist. We had to create it. We had to push for it. We had to introduce something new to create those conditions for success. The next change we had to make was pivoting from it seeing like a design-led program to one that was business-led. Everyone knew me as the face of the program, and I could tell you all the stats about how it was cohesive, and we increased our usability scores, and we had accessibility all sorted, and all of these different elements, like it's personalized now. We created a new customization feature, and it's modern because the new branding's in there. But if I couldn't get execs to dog food it and know it's better and still not prioritize it to really give it teeth and mandate it across the business, it was never going to be successful. I needed somebody who could take it to the next level and talk about the business elements.
And so what makes good business? Experimentation. So we had to get them on board and start to speak their language. So there was a lot of firsts in this journey. The first was the biggest A/B test that Atlassian has ever run, comparing the old to the new navigation across 9 key metrics. And these metrics, where did they come from? We sat down and we had the business team, we had the product team, and we had the design team together and started to spar what really mattered. How are we going to compare different scenarios? If core usage goes up 30% and revenue drops too, is that okay? Can we make decisions? It gave us a common framework and language to think about what we were embarking on. And it also brought out some fears. The business thought we were going to tank revenue. We were moving all the different entry points that drove first purchase into different spots. And so it helped us understand what the risk thresholds were of what we needed to think about. And that helped us experiment with confidence, not for us, but for the business to get on board to have the same conviction we had when we were going forward. And this gave us the avoidance of a knee-jerk reaction in the midst of it. which brings us to our next learning. This is all about holding the line. Holding the line is when it is easier to give up or give in than to go through. These are those gut check moments when you really need to say, do I firmly believe in what I'm doing? And lo and behold, imposter syndrome can start to rear its ugly head. So if you remember where we started from, we had people saying this can't be done, anxiety from the past. There was nothing that was really going for us. There was a lot of fear and anxiety in the business. How are we going to manage this? So we decided to normalize what to expect up front, before the storm started happening, before the heat of the moment. We normalized what would be normal user behavior, what the normal feedback would be, the metric movements, how this would change. And that allowed a sense of calm to come over the team, Atlassian, and our customers, and it gave us a sense that we got this. And the way we did this is we looked at what we valued and what was non-negotiable. We cared about quality, we cared about consistency, and we wanted to manage the risk. This drove 5 key principles for us that we took and applied to every single decision. The first was first impression. If you remember correctly, our quality wasn't that great. We wanted to make sure that we sweat every single detail of that first experience for that customer to make sure we win their hearts and minds back, that we are a different Atlassian. We also had triggers to pause the rollout. With many different stakeholders with a lot to lose on the line, we had to figure out between performance, usability, and business metrics, when were we going to pull the and-on cord? When do we need to stop? And we really screwed up. We also wanted to balance speed and quality. Sometimes at Atlassian, we will ship very quickly to hit a team event, and then, as Tarra said, we move on to something else. And so knowing that was the behavior of the organization, we had to think differently about what we prioritized and how we would actually package up work so when we did hit those timelines, it was a quality product going out to the customer. And then we were obsessive about our target cohort. And this really helped us separate signal from noise. Because when you are impacting millions of people, you are going to get millions of pieces of feedback. And what do you do with all of that? For us, it was a good filtering mechanism to figure out who we wanted to listen to, what we cared about, and what we would do next. And lastly, as Tarra mentioned, we had a minimum bar for rollout. We wanted to make sure that every customer, no product what you had in Atlassian, would have a really great experience. And this changed everything for us. It changed how we thought, how we behaved, what we prioritized, and what we valued.
So starting in the product, remember this is what it looked like. It didn't scale. It had objects that behaved differently. Things were wildly inconsistent. It didn't offer scale for the business we needed to grow. So we came up with this pattern, and we could cascade this because it was simple and easy. It just had converged 3 different components that it was easy for designers and engineers to implement. And then, of course, there would be muscle memory with users understanding this consistent pattern. You can just see the harmonization as people would move between products doing their jobs to be done. And internally, what this pattern meant is we were finally able to balance flexibility and cohesiveness. We were able to give those local product experiences what they needed, but still have it look like it was designed by one hand. It also meant it unlocked our design system. So one of the stats I use for this is saying that, hey, we were able to show our brand refresh in terms of color, typography, iconography being serviced in the product, but also when these components were released to the business, there was a very low detachment rate of less than 1%. And what that means is when we offered a component from the design system to the teams, they weren't detaching it and making it bespoke for themselves and customizing it. It was fit for purpose for both customers as well as what we call our maker teams. But lastly, it was a foundation for strategic growth. So Atlassian has a new strategy of the Atlassian system of work, and that's all about having users cross-flow between products, about scale, about consistency, about putting our best foot forward with a really great brand. And that scale of allowing first, second, and third-party apps would not have been possible without this redesign. It's a tangible manifestation and foundation for our strategy, and we just wouldn't have been able to move forward as a company without it. So it changed how we work together, and obviously the product. There's over 40% of all Atlassian users on this new navigation. Created brand cohesion, so it's not just you're in Confluence and they all look differently. It feels Atlassian. We also had the VP of Slack, the VP of Design for Slack, when they did their renavigation, said, oh, it's going to be 6 months before you return to baseline metrics. And luckily, we were able to return in just a few weeks. We had one design with one code base, and we were able to bag the product category for women leading tech, so we now claim that it's an award-winning program.
And I want to wrap us up with some of these key headline metrics, basically starting from where a leadership thought we were going to go and where we ended. And these actually made their jaws drop and made them believe that good experiences can drive business outcomes. When we started the navigation, they said, this is plumbing, this is tax. It's a do no harm experience, which basically meant zero uplift and engagement. And because of the craft and the care that we put into this, we actually drove a 15% engagement uplift across all products. And for revenue, we were willing to take a little bit of a dip just because of the customer behavior change that Tarra mentioned. But this shocked everybody and is still driving ripple effects across the org. We actually increased revenue by about 16% for everybody and about a third for our target customer. This is now reshaping how we think about purchasing and engagement metrics across the board because now we have a great design. And lastly, we wanted to look at the jobs to be done, a more qualitative metric. This was an opt-out. We gave every end user an opportunity to say, not for me, I want to go somewhere else. I need to go back to the old because you can't do what I needed to do. And for a rollout of this size, which is touching millions of people, 5% is actually really great. And we were able to land a sub 3% the entire time, which is pretty impressive when you think we literally moved everyone's cheese. So when they say that project can't be done, when they say AI is going to take your job, I'm here to remind you that you are in control of your career. If you lead with intent, with heart, you find a good partner in crime, and you have a plan for the unknown, you can make big change. This is selection effect. This is about doing those crazy things that people are too afraid to take on. But with a plan of how to manage the unknown, you can sprint in the dark and make the impossible possible. Thank you, guys. Good.